Good evening, Edgemont community. My name is Teresa Kaufman, parent of a 7th grader and VP of Parent Forums for the PTSA. Welcome to our first event. I will be facilitating the talk this evening with Nadia Streiter, who is here on your screen, who will be providing our community with insightful information for the concern of most of us, which is screen time. I'll read you a little bio on Nadia and then we will get started. Nadia is a psychotherapist and parent coach in Westport, Connecticut, as well as programs director at Game Quitters, where she co-created their parent program, Reclaim. She has specific expertise in treating adolescents and adults who struggle with video game addiction, problematic technology use, and often co-occurring ADHD, anxiety, and depression. Along with her professional background, she has a direct knowledge and experience as a mother of 3 children who have grown up during the current technology-driven era. She is a frequent speaker on the topic of technology and digital wellness, and very much enjoys working with parents and organizations seeking help during these increasingly challenging times. Welcome, Nadia.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for inviting me. Welcome to my living room, and thank you all for having me into your kitchens and living rooms tonight.
Yes, thank you for spending the time with us. We really appreciate that. So my first question is going to be based on that intro. What is digital awareness? But I will let you begin and we'll go from there.
We're going to do a little screen share here, which hopefully is successful. Technology never likes when I have something negative to say about it. So in any case, I think everybody can relate to this. Go to bed. I'll be here tomorrow. I know that's how I feel. And certainly with parents and children spending most of their time at home and in front of a screen, I feel like this is a really good reminder. So I sort of wanted to start off with a little humor there. Digital wellness for me is basically having a healthy relationship with technology. And that can look really different for different people. So the goal would be to extract the positives for you and to minimize the negatives, to seek for life-enhancing experiences via technology, not experiences that detract from your well-being or happiness. And also, you know, in that we're so dominated by technology that we need to consider context and content and not just quantity, because there's so many great things you can do now. There's so much less pollution. Some would argue the garbage heap is, you know, much smaller because we don't have all these individual, we don't have a separate camera, you don't have a separate iPod, you don't have, you know, all the things that you are contained in this little device matter from a garbage and ecology standpoint. And so we have to consider, you know, content and context. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It does. Betsy, feel free to chime in here if you have anything that you would like to add or anything.
Yeah, I'd really like to make this as sort of a freewheeling and open conversation, as if the whole audience, I could see everyone. It's so much better that way, but we're attempting that tonight. So, so I think we talked about, you know, understanding what that would look like for people. Like how much of anything. And as I said, it's going to be different for different people. But if we look at this chart, I think it's a good way to consider, you know, what you want to do less of and what you want to do most with, because we are not going to be able to avoid screens and we're not going to be able to avoid technology use. And, you know, it's just growing and growing. And soon we're going to have the VR glasses as sort of a standard in our homes. And, you know, I'm beginning to see even more of that. So, you know, how do we use these things? Do we use it to play games all day, or do we use it to pretend we're visiting Paris or, you know, some other exotic place when we wouldn't be able to? So I think just trying to understand, you know, from a digital wellness standpoint, again, it's going to be less mindless scrolling, definitely less comparison or validation seeking, which can be really challenging for young people. Binge watching is something that everybody is struggling with, but I'm going to put that to the side during the pandemic because that can also be a saver. So whatever your relationship is, where you can, again, extract positives, extract creativity, find discovery, minimize the negatives like over scrolling and comparison, then you're going to find yourself in a position where you are achieving greater digital health.
I think also pre-pandemic, we did spend a lot of time and we had tools to get away from technology. And now that we're in the pandemic and maybe even post-pandemic, we're so tied to it. It's almost, people are working and their companies aren't going back physically because they're doing the work virtually. So what does that mean for the how much question becomes so open?
The how much question is really, really challenging. And, so all the thoughts that I and, other really, my colleagues and some very important thought leaders that I admire, where we were going with this was so different pre-pandemic from where it is now. And, I was always troubled by people shunning or, the absolutes with technology. They were completely anti-screen time. It was the great evil. And one of the first posts that I created, and again, I have very mixed feelings about posting, was, isn't it ironic that the very technology we blamed for disconnecting us is the very technology that's keeping us connected and also keeping us informed? As I get my updates from, the governor here in Connecticut, and I'm sure you get yours from New York, what should we be doing right now to keep ourselves healthy? So, again, it's about seeking, although I treat illness, it's also really about seeking wellness. And I think that's important. So let me move ahead here a little bit because people, they want to know, they get the concepts and they want to know, okay, so
what are the answers?
What do I do? Like, we all know we're anxious about this, but what are we going to do? So as fast as any of us can come up with answers, a new app appears or a new challenge with technology, such as the pandemic, where suddenly everybody was forced, in front of a screen for a significant part of their day, if not all of their day, both for work, school, and entertainment. So I like to think in terms of overarching principles, and what overarching principles can we apply that are going to help us stay ahead a little bit of every change that we're facing or every new app that comes along. So one of them falls under the idea of creating friction, and by that I mean make it as difficult as possible to use technology in the ways that enhance your life less than ideal. So, for example, if you delete an app from your phone, it doesn't mean that you can't use it in your browser, but it creates a little friction. It creates a little time for you to say, oh, do I really want to go onto Facebook right now? Do I really want to go onto Instagram? So now I've got to go through this extra effort. And if you don't have the auto login, that's even better, because not only do you've got to now load this and then sign in. So that creates some friction and slows the process down. Also apps that are, geared for productivity or that block certain, like there are apps that block YouTube, or there's something called YouTube DF, which is distraction free. Like YouTube is one of the biggest parental complaints that I hear on a constant basis. And of course, I'm laughing to myself as you all are watching this on YouTube. I mean, the irony for me is so incredibly thick. And again, this is what kind of gets me really excited about its content, its context. It's not just about quantity. It's not just about social media being this bad thing. It's about us learning how to harness it. So, I get very passionate about that. But we can use apps to help us manage our tech use, our screen use, and our digital wellness. From a homework and also professional work standpoint, one thing that I really encourage, both parents and kids and, employers to encourage their employees is the one device rule. So if you're on one screen, whether it be for school or whether it is sitting in your family room with your computer on your lap and your phone next to you and the TV in the background, I'm going to say, try to shrink down to one device. See if you can be satisfied with one device. And, that will also help eliminate distractions when you're trying to think and you're trying to work. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So also charging in another room. Now, anybody who's listening here can Google, the term, how do I reduce screen time? You're going to find, a whole bunch of standard ideas. Don't bring it to the table, have your kids charge all in one place in a central location, blah, blah, blah. And again, that doesn't always, if you have somebody that likes to listen to music before they go to sleep, or, I like audiobooks. So for me, I couldn't not have my device because I turn out the lights and I have somebody read a story to me. So I love that. But charging your phone in another room again, or your computer where you step away does create some friction, because at some point the juice starts to go and then you have to separate from it. So if you can put it somewhere else, then you've got a moment in time where it's away from you and you've got to make this extra effort to go and use it again. I also think it's really helpful if you can commit to checking, whatever it is you like to check, whether it's parents wanting to check emails or parents wanting to check news or social media, or, kids wanting to do the same, catch up on what's going on, who's streaming on Twitch and so on. You check a set number of times in a day, like you allow yourself, it's going to be this many times, or it's only going to be at this particular time. So I'll do it at noon, and I'll do it at 3, and I'll do it at 7, and I can feel excited about that. I know it's coming, but I put, I've made some friction or created a boundary. Actually, I realize I should probably go on my next slide. And then, as simple as it might seem, grayscaling, especially on your phone, if you grayscale your device, it's a little less exciting. So
can you tell us what grayscale is exactly?
Well, let's see.
I don't have my phone. Do I?
Be able to do it for you, but if you can see here, there's a lot of great color here, and there's a setting that I can go into, which might take me a moment or two.
It's a setting on your phone to make it
display and bright. I think it's under display and brightness. And suddenly the color, all those colorful apps, are now just black and white.
Oh, okay.
So, little bit of friction there. It's like walking into a candy store and all the wrappers are just gray.
Right.
Maybe not, you still know it's chocolate, still know they're jelly beans or Skittles, but it's a little less tempting when it's gray. So another overarching principle that I find very helpful is the thought of boundaries. So I think it's really, really important to determine what can wait, and teach your children and help, decide for yourself, what can actually wait. Some things can't wait. Some things require a timely response. If your child is working on a group project, or you're working on a group project at work, and you're waiting to see when the other person is finished with their piece, or they need to know if you're finished with yours, it's important to understand that is something that requires a timely response. Or, you know, with a divorce rate of 50% here, responding to the other parent and not making them wait, you know, they deserve a timely response. And I'm really sensitive about that, since so many families, you know, are split up. I think that's important, and that can be a tool used against the non-custodial parent. So figure out what can wait and figure out what can't wait. Your friend who wants to show you a funny meme, maybe that can wait until after dinner. And again, learning what can wait, what can't wait, creating boundaries with your friends and your colleagues where they understand I'm not always going to be available, and that's okay. I'm okay with it, and I want you to be okay with it. Some people say set away messages, and set away messages like habitually. So you can do that for a part of your day with emails if your employer will allow it. You can do that for part of your day or on a weekend. Also, you can set away messages or unavailable messages while driving. And I think that's a really important thing to encourage, you know, kids to do, because the fear is being out of touch or left out or missing. You know, it's not just fear of missing out, but it's fear of being missed, or fear of becoming invisible, fear of, you know, missing a piece of information. So if you get into the habit of letting people know you'll get to it, you know, shortly, then that's a healthy boundary. I think another important boundary relates to opportunity costs. In, again, thinking about, you know, so using, you know, going on TikTok, gaming, reading the news. You know, we have this productivity illusion sometimes going on, but at a certain point, you know, the first hour, the second hour may be enhancing your life of whatever you're doing. And again, I'm not going to judge, because there are people that want to be fashion designers, and following Instagram fashion influencers is going to be really helpful for them. You've got kids that from Parkland who helped to create a whole, you know, anti-gun movement as a result of school shootings. So, you know, again, all of the social media and all the technology can be used in some really positive ways, but at a certain point, they're diminishing returns. And you have to be able to identify what's that boundary, what's my point of diminishing returns, and what's the opportunity cost by continuing to do that. What could I be doing instead? So I think that's a very important aspect, and again, covers all future apps and covers, I think, almost all scenarios where, you know, we're going to be forced to use technology and have to think about it in a productive and constructive way. And another one I think that's very important message that I really want to get out to parents, and maybe it doesn't fall under the category of boundaries, but choose the human interaction whenever possible. And what I mean by that is, you know, parents for a long time were complaining that their kids didn't know how to communicate. They couldn't talk to one another. They only knew how to text. I thought about that for a long time, and I always stick up for kids. Like, that's sort of my thing, is stick up for the kids. You know, Elvis was gyrating his hips, and that didn't create a pandemic. But at that time, people thought it would. So, you know, what is that like for a kid who's watching their parent? Well, when parent wants information, you know, and they make a phone call to customer service, and you get directed to www. Oh, you can check, you know, your bill here, you can pay here.
20 minutes later when you're redirected.
But you know what? When your child hears the conversation that you're having with someone on the other end, that helps them understand how to communicate. I really believe that is a huge aspect of why children have difficulty communicating with one another in a non-vocal way, but they turn to, text and, Snapchat and so on, is because they don't hear their parents talking as much. It's much easier to make an appointment online, or it's much easier to go to the self-checkout. It's much easier to do all these things, with parents using technology instead of parents modeling a human interaction. So I always want to encourage that as sort of an antidote to digital illness, an antidote to social anxiety, which we know can be, either we don't know that there's actual causation, but we know there's correlation between, social media use and technology and social anxiety. So if you don't know what your parents would say in a situation, how are you going to know? And the only way to know that is, even if your kids are really little, let them hear what you're saying and explain to them who you're calling and why you're having that interaction, or explain why you're not going to the self-check and you're going to the person and asking them how's their day and thanking them for, help with your bagging of your groceries. So, there are all these subtle things that I think, again, help with overall wellness and digital wellness and health.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So moving along here. Again, important overarching, to think principles, questions you can ask yourself to raise your own self-awareness about your usage is, why am I reaching for this right now? Or why am I staying on so long? So am I reaching for it because I am lonely? And I'm going to text a friend and hopefully get together or create a Zoom party? Reach away, reach away. Am I reaching to look up local meetups, or ways to connect with other people that have my interests, or to maybe there's something that I feel weird about in myself and I don't want to talk to another adult about, but I realize that there are other teens going through the same experiences. Yes, can be, with caveats there, a way for kids who feel that they're unusual to feel more included. So, but the question is why, and always ask yourself why. And now, why am I staying on? Is this continuing to create value for me, or is it just something I'm hiding behind so I don't actually have to interact in the real world? Is my use intentional? Like, did I plan for this? Or am I just passively being entertained? Now, in the midst of a pandemic, with all the anxiety that people are fearing and the lack of social interaction, I'm really in favor of anything that's going to keep mood elevated, period. Like almost anything, because we're also facing an emotional well-being crisis right now. We were having trouble with that pre-COVID, but it's intensified. So if for the time being, there's going to be more passive scrolling and entertaining of oneself, but you're keeping it together, I'm okay with that. I think important to understand now, when you're looking at, again, social media in particular, am I being used here? Because we live in, I don't know, how common knowledge this is. I hear about this all day, but we live in what's known as an attention economy. So the longer anybody can keep your eyes on their screen, they're making money from you just by holding your attention. So, the question is, if they're holding your attention, are you actually getting something from it also, or are you just being used as a product to make money for somebody else? And how much of that are you okay with? Maybe you're okay with a little bit. Maybe you're okay with more than a little. Again, these are all really individual, individual questions. Everybody's can have their own set of values around it. People might feel there are trade-offs that are worth it for them. But food for thought. You can also ask yourself, when you pick up a device or you get in front of a screen, can this be done in a different way? So maybe instead of texting a friend, you might actually call them, or Zoom with them these days, but not, a little more human connection that way. So always asking, can this be done in a different way? Again, back to the grocery store. Can I not deal with the robot? Can I deal with the person? So is what I'm doing right now actually improving my life? Like, is it, or is this something I'm telling myself, a story I'm telling myself that now after I've read, 5 articles about COVID, is the 6th one actually improving my life, or is it just elevating my anxiety and not improving my life? Is sitting here, watching this YouTube tonight improving your life, or is it just, something that's distracting you from interacting with the other people in your house? I mean, even the good stuff can be not so good sometimes. So, and then I also like people to ask themselves, what am I missing out on? So am I missing being outdoors? Am I missing exercising? Am I missing other interactions? And, these are very personal questions. But if you ask those of yourself, if you have those conversations with your children, if you teach your children to have these critical thinking skills about their use of technology, I feel more optimistic that we can create digital wellness or maintain digital health, and that we will be able to continue to, as technology continues to dominate our world more and more.
Interesting.
So I'm going to keep moving unless you have another question.
This is great.
Okay.
No, you're doing great.
Let's go. I said I was going to do a PowerPoint, and here I am.
I know. Exactly.
So,
great.
When we think about, like, people always talk about their kids being addicted to technology or addicted to gaming, or they talk about themselves being addicted to their phones and so on. So like alcohol or substances, you really don't have to use. Like, you can abstain. But technology, you have to use. So technology for me has a little bit more, it's got a food, an eating disorder sort of component to it, not just an addiction component to it. So I thought an easy way for people to explain to especially younger kids how to think about, limiting their screen time or how to use their screen time. And it's not difficult to remember. It's not, there's no rocket science here. It can be used for adults and children the same, but let's talk about tech like you eat. Okay. So, we encourage nutritious eating, but, we also have dessert. So, if you're on Twitch for hours, it's not the same as being on, looking at your screen and learning how on YouTube to build your own drone or doing a digital art program. So I would call that more nutritious tech use, just like my broccoli and my carrots are more nutritious on the plate.
Right, reading the news, a lot of people are doing that online now, so
right.
That's all.
Portion control, yep. Not a difficult concept for most people. Everybody knows about portion control. Eat a slice of cake, don't eat the whole cake. Same application for, all the ways that you use the fun parts of technology, but even for the workaholics that are listening here, or those that are in relationships with workaholics, portion control, portion control, portion control. I like this a lot. If you eat all day, you're going to gain unnecessary weight. And if you're teching all day, you're going to have unnecessary eye and brain strain. So sort of like we eat at regular times. Again, I like the idea of, tech at regular times. And, 3 times a day, 6 times a day, I'm a grazer. I'm okay with that. But just not all day. Like that's not all day. I think also a really good food analogy is if something upsets your stomach, don't eat it. Like you don't eat food that gives you an upset stomach or that you have an allergic reaction to. So don't follow, like unfollow whoever doesn't make you feel good. Turn off what is raising your anxiety. Like, where's that point where a little bit of information is helpful and then diminishing returns, and now it has become harmful. So if your sense of well-being is upset, you have to think of it like something that a food you're allergic to. Do not ingest that.
Yeah.
And then simply, we don't eat in bed. I mean, I eat in bed. People who know me, I like to eat in bed. But, generally we consider eating in bed a no-no. It's messy and it also can disrupt sleep. So if you don't eat in bed, don't tech in bed. And these are just really, really simple principles that you can explain to from the youngest to the oldest, to kind of get the message across and, help yourself think about how you can be mindful and create digital wellness for yourself, and think about creating some screen, boundaries and some screen friction, because this is not rocket science. It may feel like it, but it doesn't have to be.
I think it's a lot harder to do than to say we'll do. It's hard not to have your phone by your bed, I think sometimes. And for people, in terms of the boundaries, you touched on that, but it also ties into the don't eat in bed and don't tech in bed. So many companies and employers are expecting people, and even for volunteer reasons, are expecting people to get back to their emails. And so if you turn on your phone, if you get up in the night and turn on your phone, you could have emails. And if you don't get back to people, sometimes your employer is upset with you, or what is that line between the boundary, charging your phone in a different room, and I'd like to keep my job? Or,
Yeah,
what would you say to?
I know the common, the average person in my position who would be talking to you about this would say, charge your phone in another room. And again, it's really simple, and I just don't know how practical it is. So I think you can, when your battery's running low, charge in another room to get a break, but to not charge your phone by your bed may not be realistic. And so that's why, I ask people to think about, okay, so what am I doing here? Like, how can I create a boundary with work? Work-life balance was a tremendous issue pre-COVID. Now it's become, an even bigger issue now. So, and social media, the troubles with social media are not limited to kids. I mean, I will check my LinkedIn and I'll see that, colleagues, somebody's giving a talk here, or somebody published a paper there. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm falling behind, or I've become invisible. And well, why didn't somebody think of me to speak on that? And, it gets my anxiety up. So, we're all in this. And I think it's really important to let your kids acknowledge it for yourself. And then also let your kids know that you're going through this with them. And whatever ways, sometimes just the experience of that conversation, helps create a better bond and trusting relationship between parent and child, also between partners, that, we understand some of this is out of our control, and that we're all really trying to get it under control. And if you can create, again, that routines of how many times that you're going to do it, or the set time of day, like I can have my phone, I can turn on my meditation app, but I'm going to try not to check my emails before 8 a.m. And if you're in that unfortunate situation where your employer is not okay with that, then it becomes more important to carve out that time for yourself outside as much as possible.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's kind of it for my
Those
my slides.
slides were great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If anyone listening would like to submit a question, we can take a few questions now. Nadia, I do have a few that are here. Do you mind if I read them?
Yep, let's go.
Okay. My son is a good student and does everything that's asked of him, but all he does in his free time is play video games online with his friends. It seems harmless, is it?
Right. Well, that's a tough question, and a question that I might have answered differently 9 months ago than now. So I think that, we have to look at what risk factors exist for any given child when we're looking at screen time and especially video gaming. So, are there a lot of risk factors that apply to that child? Frequently, when I hear that a child is doing really well in school and has a relatively active, they're not socially vulnerable, they have an active social life, the tone of that question doesn't indicate to me a high conflict home. This is what they're doing to socialize, which is becoming, almost knocked over my water, becoming more and more common. As long as they're not getting to a point where when they're offered another activity, they're saying no, then I think right now, again, like mental health, right now, if you're distance learning, is number one. And by virtue of returning to what we consider to be a more normal lifestyle, hopefully, at some point in the not too distant future, that's going to eliminate a number of hours of screen, that kind of screen time, just by virtue of not being home.
Right.
So harmless, games are built to, keep you coming back. Games are built, they have a lot of addictive characteristics to them. They're created by tapping the minds of behavioral psychologists, and they use the same principles as slot machines. So again, you can be playing with fire, but it doesn't mean that you are. So I hope that answers whoever's question that was. Encourage them to have balance in their day, and then go play. Go play with your friends.
Thank you. Thank you. We might have touched on this. How can we encourage students' independent discipline? So the students themselves to do the things in this slide, to turn off their phones, to charge them in a different
role model,
Mm-hmm.
talk about what you're doing, delineate, we take for granted that our kids assume that whatever we're doing on technology, they should be assuming is not frivolous. And that's not accurate, although a lot of what we're doing often isn't frivolous. So the conversation about, how much frivolous time I have, and we're all allowed to have some, like there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But the best way to get your kids to be the way you want them to be is to role model being that way yourself, and to have open channels of communication and conversation, and not to shame. So, tell stories about yourself, share your struggles with sometimes turning off, maybe share your own childhood struggles of, discipline or times that you didn't feel disciplined. That's really the way.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel, what are your takes about punishment with taking the technology away? The kids all want their technology. So the one leverage that some of us parents have is, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, or study your Spanish flashcards, you're going to lose your device. But they actually need the device to study the Spanish. How would, what's the medium?
Again,
there's maybe no good answer.
Right. Again, really, so the answers I had for these questions a few years ago as compared to now are so different. And I can't tell you that I know all the answers. I think that it is, in an ideal world, you tie consequences, to the action. So if it's not studying, it's not, why are they not studying? If somebody doesn't do their chores, there's a natural consequence that should be tied to chores, not necessarily to screens. So, one family I work with, for example, each one of their kids has a dinner routine chore. Somebody set the table, somebody clears, somebody's got dishwasher, so on. So when somebody breaks a rule, I say, well, then you just tell them like they have to do the other two, their siblings chores for that day also. So, because sometimes you can't take the technology away realistically. And then also, I get this sense that, like, again, it creates this like generational divide, this power struggle, this, it's the forbidden fruit. You don't understand me. And, those are not healthy ways. Those are not healthy ways to interact with your child. So, now, I get parents often saying to me, well, that's the only thing I can do. And maybe right now it is. Like maybe today it is. So take some time today to think about what you might have done before. I brainstorm with parents all the time in terms of, well, is that really the only thing, or can I actually help you think of some other things? Because it's easier for me to look into your home and see, than it is for you who's in your home and feeling emotional about the experience. So there's usually more to it, but sometimes it requires getting to know, the family. So circling all the way back around, I'm not absolutely against it, and I'm definitely not wholeheartedly in favor of that.
Okay. I
I'd rather have you ask your child why they didn't do their homework and really understand that than punish them with taking away a screen.
Okay. Thank you.
So easy for me to say.
Here's an interesting question. What would be a good way to motivate students to take advantage of study hall at home wisely? They're talking about junior high students who think that academics doesn't matter at this point. But in a more general sense, if a 7th through 12th grader at Edgemont has a study hall in their day and they're virtual,
right?
I guess this is alluding maybe that, I hope I'm answering the question. I'm asking the question correctly. It's alluding to the student is taking that study hall as free for all,
right?
But it's home and it's virtual. So,
well,
how does that?
In my experience, many kids in study hall would like to have that be a free for all when they were in the building as well. I mean, some people are able to use the time effectively, and some people are not. I think that ability is diminished by, really just Zoom or screen fatigue, by lack of, think of the lack of stimulation on so many fronts. We're craving, and kids especially like craving any kind of interaction and stimulation. So, to the extent that you can help them understand that if you finish it now, you'll have more free time later, that's great. But I think you also have to ask yourself, like, who is this really for? Am I doing this for them, or am I doing this because this makes my life easier? And again, no bad on the parent that needs to make their life easier, because I think this is, in history, has to be the most challenging, at least in modern history, time to be a parent. So, but at least be honest with yourself about it. Because I think that when you're honest with yourself about it, then that facilitates more honest conversations. Children can smell when you're BSing them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Here is another question. My son is tech savvy. He knows how to bypass filters to play games while studying on another tab. How do we convince him not to do that?
Right. How do we
Yeah,
convince them
that's
not
a
to do
good, they're very savvy, these kids. They
I
are.
get that question a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are lots and lots, and there's a growing number of, tools, blocking and monitoring tools that, you can install on your child's device. And, one of the benefits of also one device only is that that does reduce that. But I mean, again, one of the hardest things about being a parent right now is figuring out how to control this. So you've got the kid who knows how to get around it. And, so what we would say is give them a little psychoeducation. Have them do a little experiment and see how much longer it takes to do your homework if when you're going back and forth, and like knock yourself out, go back and forth the entire time, as much as you want to, and see how long it takes you to do your homework, versus no going back and forth and now do your homework and see how that works. Because once you've, there is no such thing as multitasking really. And they say that it takes, it can take up to about 23 minutes, like once you've been disrupted, to get back into the flow. So let's say that that's not the case. Any kid that's listening to this, or the parent says that's what I said, is going to tell you absolutely not. But let's just say it takes 3 minutes. I don't think that's really unreasonable to like fully get back into your flow. So if you've got a homework assignment that's an hour long, and you're going back and forth at, you go back and forth 10 times, now you've just increased by 30 minutes at a minimum how long that homework's going to take to do. So I would say try to encourage them to experiment.
Okay.
And again, like ask yourself, like, what's your goal here? Is your child doing well in school? And this is just troublesome for you? Is it a lack of feeling of control that this is creating? Is it a power thing? I mean, this does happen actually. Where that's really what's going on is parents are feeling so powerless in so many ways that wherever they can feel they have some control, they want to exercise it. And, for a child that's doing really well in school, you might not need to be putting that kind of pressure on them.
We have another question. What is the research on children's eye development regarding technology use?
I would say not great. There's not a significant body of research yet that I can speak to. And, I'm not trained in eye care or, ophthalmology. But, there are a lot of concerns beginning to be raised about blue light and how much time we're spending on screens and the effect on that. But, if you think about it, the longitudinal data is really not there, because how long have we been on screens for the amount of time that we're on them right now? So hard to say.
That's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I really, there's so many things there's so many questions that regarding, from a research standpoint that I would like to be able to answer, but we can speculate. But if you think about it, there just isn't that much long-term data, because we haven't had, we haven't had smartphones for that long. We haven't been Zooming, for that long.
Right.
We haven't been giving kids devices. Where I live, all kids were required to bring a device to school when my youngest son was in high school. That's new. How can we know what the impact of that is? So, I don't want to raise people's anxiety unnecessarily when I don't really have clear data.
Okay. You ready for another question? Do you want to take a drink of water or anything? I feel like you've been talking.
I know, I don't even know what time it is. Oh, 7:51. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Wise.
Hope there are lots of questions.
Here we go. Blocking access is one way to curtail use. Wondering, do you give total privacy? I think kids feel like they have total rights to privacy to their devices. Oh, I see. Should we be monitoring posts? Do you understand that? Do you want me to read it again?
I do, because I wrote an article about this.
Okay. So you know where I'm going. Yeah.
To spy or not to spy. So, one, it depends on your child. To some degree, it does depend on your child, everything I'm going to say. So if you have a child that has been diagnosed with depression, who's got tendencies, any kind of self-harm tendencies, you have any concern about that, or homicidal tendencies, that is sort of a separate bundle. So from the perspective of monitoring, absolutely no spying, period. Like, imagine somebody going into your room and reading your journal or your diary when you were a 10-year-old writing in a diary, or a 20-year-old. Like, it is such an incredible violation of trust between parent and child. And it is a really, really difficult to repair, and tends to create a lot of long damage in the relationship. So no spying. So then now the question is, well, why do you want to monitor? Like, what's your concern? Does your child have an after-school job delivering pizzas and you want to track where they're going? Absolutely, positively, I think you should. They're getting into an Uber. Yep. Monitor, away. If they say they're going to a friend's house and you're watching and they stopped at another friend's house instead, or then maybe they went to your local, whatever the new 7-Eleven is, and, got something to eat. Like, if you're going to question them to death, what did you do that? Or why did you go there? Or who are you with? And so on. No, not so good. Not so good at all. So, it depends on what kind of control you can exercise in the monitoring. And then, sometimes I want to say, like, who's got time to read texts, somebody else's texts all day long? Like, the amount of content that's there, and not having a context to understand it is troubling. So I say proceed with caution, again, unless you have a child that you're really concerned with, who is, has poor decision-making skills, or has maybe some mental health concerns, on the forefront.
Okay. Betsy, do you have any thoughts or questions? My questions are finished from my list here. Do you have anything you are thinking about?
Well, I've learned a lot, I have to say. I really have. And especially for myself, less for my kids. Your screen about friction really resonated with me. And also the self-awareness screen I thought was fantastic.
Thank you.
And I plan on sharing that with my kids, to be a bit more mindful about what my intentions are, about what their intentions are, and why now, why choose this mode of entertainment, or what is it keeping me from? What am I perhaps avoiding? I thought those resonated deeply with me. So I appreciate that. And I'm as guilty as my kids. When you mentioned about the driving the apps that you can use while driving, I find that my kids are much more diligent about keeping their phones out of reach while they're driving, which is great. I guess the message really got to them. And, we learned technology along with our kids. I mean, we all got the smartphone on the same day. So it was very hard, letting us off the hook a little bit as adults. It was very hard for us to, teach them the ropes we didn't really know what the ropes were. So we should be not so critical of ourselves, maybe a little more empathetic, and just, we're all doing the best we can. So thank you for supporting us and teaching us.
Yes.
Very helpful.
I'm glad that you got some value out of that. And, you know, I really, I strongly believe, and, you know, data does support, you know, a lot of data to support that children will do, you know, children get their values from home for the most part. And, you know, they will, you're the best role model for them. So just your raised self-awareness and the question that you might ask, or something that you might point out, you know, that you're doing and that you're required to do versus something that you're choosing to do. And, you know, again, and that you've asked yourself, well, was there something I could do instead? Or showing them that you did it a different way instead. You know, we really need to teach the critical thinking skills, long-term critical thinking skills here, for how to remain or create, you know, digital health for ourselves.
Right. Right. Well, this was very informative. I so appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and your slides. It's such a pleasure to meet you.
It's great to work with you.
And I also just want to say a quick thank you to Kyle and to Betsy for helping us. And I think this is going, will we be able to have access to this on YouTube, Betsy? Yes. Okay.
It'll be up on the website. Sure.
Great. Wonderful.
Mhm.
Hi, Kyle.
I'll also send this out in my weekly update for anyone who wants to view it.
Okay. Wonderful. Nadia, thank you again for your time.
My pleasure.
And thank you everyone for coming tonight.
Feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions or people need individualized guidance and support. It's what I love doing.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.